All right, so this one is going to involve some jump cuts, by the way, because I'm about to get interrupted while shooting. But anyways, first off, I should come clean. I'm thinking about using kind of a clickbaity title for this one, and I need to make it clear up front that I'm not arguing against the entire concept of concealed carry. That would be really weird because I carry a pistol every day. I'm at work right now and I've got one on me now. So yeah, if you were coming here thinking that I was gonna, say that it should be banned or whatever, don't worry about it. Not that kind of video. This is really primarily about your mindset, and by you, I don't mean everyone watching, but there are certain types of people who really have no business going so far as to begin carrying a concealed firearm. So, let's get into some examples of that. Number one, if you don't know the laws in your area, don't carry. If there are magazine capacity limits, for one thing, you ought to know about those. As far as carrying in your car, the laws for that can be all over the place, all throughout the US. I don't even want to think about other countries. So you need to be aware of that. If you haven't looked into that yet, you're this guy. Brandishing, for example. Brandishing. It goes by different names in different places. Some people call it defensive display, which is basically you have drawn your firearm or otherwise made it known that you have one, but you aren't actually shooting at somebody yet. No rounds have been fired, but the gun is present and people are aware of it. This, in some jurisdictions, is fucking illegal. It could be considered aggravated assault and would be justification for whoever is in this altercation with you to use lethal force on you in some cases. In other states, it's fine. So if you haven't even considered the legal ramifications there, again, I'm sorry, but you're this guy. Good news is you can change that and you can read up on this stuff. For example, the Active Self-Protection channel is a great source for some of this stuff. If you want to go really deep into it, of course, it's best to talk to like a local lawyer, look into your states and also cities' legal codes directly. Of course, there's going to be a lot of legalese, so I would talk to somebody who knows what's up first. But yeah, that's something right off the bat. Storage, transportation, actually carrying, what kind of gun or magazine or ammunition you can have, when it's legally justified to use it. That's number one. Number two, not just legally justified to use it, but morally. If you are wanting to carry a gun because you think you're the Punisher, don't carry a gun. It's not Looney Tunes. You can't be like Yosemite Sam and just every time you get angry, you whip out a pair of guns and just start blasting. You're going to go to prison. And if you hit somebody, you're probably going to go to prison on a murder charge and spend the rest of your life there. Another thing to note that a lot of people don't seem to know is that if you start a fight, even if you don't jump to deadly force, if you, for example, say you're out in public, somebody does something like they get in line in front of you at fucking McDonald's or whatever, it pisses you off, so you confront them about it. This is okay so far. So you have a verbal argument with this person and it starts to get heated. And you're being provocative, you're calling them an asshole, you're yelling at them, maybe you even shove them. At this point, you have used physical force. It's not deadly force, it's just a little shove or whatever. I don't know, some jurisdictions might even call that, because, a lawyer could argue that if you push somebody too hard, they could fall on the ground and hit their head, and then that becomes deadly force. This shit gets really tricky. You really need to know this stuff. But say, you just kind of push the guy's chest or whatever, he pushes you back, and it just keeps escalating. Well, first of all, you were the first one to shove. That already has made you at fault for this. even if you're not the first one to shove, if you keep escalating the situation, it turns into a fist fight and you're absolutely throwing blows along with this guy, again, this is going to get you in trouble in court if you actually end up having to shoot. Which, for one thing, you should not shoot somebody over just, some shoving or a couple punches or whatever. If somebody's like got you on the ground and they're choking you out, or they're just absolutely wailing on your face, or especially if they are kicking you in the head with a shod foot, then you might start to have a case for being able to shoot. But again, this is something where it gets really fucking tricky. There are case law, I don't know if case law is necessarily the term. There are precedents here. One case in particular that you should look into is the case of a guy named Michael Drejka. Michael is spelled how you think it is. Drejka is spelled Drejka. He pulled up at a gas station. He noticed that someone was parked in the handicap spot. He got out and inspected the vehicle to look for any kind of handicap placard or license plate or anything. There wasn't one. They had no legal justification to park in the handicap spot. So he decides to start a verbal argument with the woman in the car. He's totally fucking playing hall monitor here like a dickhead. Not his job, but whatever. So he's verbally arguing with this woman, and her boyfriend, who is in the gas station, comes out because he hears this heated argument going on. He comes out and he shoves Michael Drejka. So Michael Drejka falls to the ground, and the guy who shoved him, the boyfriend, turns and starts to walk back to the store as Michael Drejka pulls his pistol. Michael Drejka fires one shot, which fatally wounds the boyfriend, who runs back into the store. So Michael Drejka is in prison, and he will be for maybe the rest of his life. I can't quite remember exactly what the sentence was, but it's at least decades. And he was no young guy to begin with. He was in his 40s or 50s at the time of the shooting. So the problem with Michael Drejka's case is, sure, he was pushed. He was not the one that started the physical altercation, but the boyfriend who he shot, after pushing Michael Drejka, he turned and began to leave. He did not continue to attack Michael Drejka. He was retreating, and Michael Drejka shot him. And that is why Michael Drejka is spending decades in prison. So if you're that internet tough guy who says, oh, well, if this guy was cutting me off in traffic and brake checking me, I'd just fucking shoot him. First of all, I doubt that. You're probably kind of a bitch and you just talk shit to feel tough. Second off, even if you did, you would get what you deserve. You would absolutely get what you deserve. So if you're that guy, don't carry. Another one, if you don't practice, if you're not competent with your firearm, if your marksmanship is shit, you really shouldn't carry. Because the fact of the matter is, you are legally and morally responsible for every round you fire. If you miss and you hit somebody else, oh boy, you are going to get legally crucified. You need to know what you're doing. And if you don't... See, the thing is, a lot of people, they get into guns kind of on a whim. And especially they have all these attitudes about it that are influenced by movies and TV and video games. And they seem to think of guns as like this totem of protection, where as long as you have one on you, then you're safe. Like the gun being there does this magical force field thing for you, and it's total bullshit. Shooting is a skill, and if you don't develop that skill, then you don't have it. So you need to practice. This is live ammunition practice on the range, also dry fire practice at home, not just marksmanship practice, but also mag changes, clearing malfunctions, your draw time, shit like that you need to know. And you also need to be really good at firing the basic rules of firearm safety. Now, another one that kind of comes off on a tangent from this is knowing some things about guns, being sure of your equipment, and carrying in a way that makes sense. So it is also safe. Using a shitty, cheap holster that isn't made to fit your weapon, um, it's probably an unsafe method of carry. At the very least, it's going to be a not very practical and useful one. But if the holster has got some particular problems with it, something might get in the trigger guard or something like that. Like it's one of those floppy nylon cloth type deals. That could present a safety issue, and you could have a negligent discharge. And in public, especially, that would be really bad. Um, there are certain types of, I think they're mostly just outside the waistband holsters, but they have a retention system where you have to press a little button on the holster to free your firearm. And there's some in particular, I think the brand is called Serpa, had this one model where the button thingy that you have to press, you press with your trigger finger, and it's like right over where the trigger guard is of the gun. And what kept happening was people would go to draw their weapon, they would press that button thing to free their firearm. But while they were pressing that button, they had their finger held down still. It went onto the trigger, and they ended up just pulling the trigger as they were drawing the firearm. And sometimes they shot themselves in the leg. Bad news. A best case scenario, you might shoot the ground instead of your leg, but no good. Don't carry a holster. Don't carry with a holster like that. Another thing is a lot of people like the idea of what's called Israeli carry. I'm sure there's a story as to why it's called that. Don't ask me if it actually is like a legit thing or not. But what it is carrying with a loaded magazine in the gun, but no rounds in the chamber, so that when you draw your gun, you have to chamber a round. This is a bad idea. The reason people want to do this is they are nervous about the safety of having one in the chamber as they're carrying. If you're that afraid of carrying a loaded gun, you're not ready yet. You have some things you need to learn still. As to why this is a particularly bad idea is, of course, if you're drawing the gun, it's because you're in a moment where your life depends on it. And in that moment, time is going to be quite limited, especially if your attacker already has a weapon out and is in a position where they could, within a couple seconds, use it on you. So going back to that channel I mentioned a moment ago, Active Self-Protection, if you watch enough of their videos, you'll see it from time to time. Somebody will do Israeli carry. And what will happen is, there will be someone robbing the place or whatever. Whoever is like the criminal has a gun out already. And if they get distracted or they kind of walk away for a second to go, grab something or whatever, and the person carrying concealed pulls their gun out, but they have to chamber a round. And before they can chamber that round, the attacker or whoever notices what's going on, whips around, and shoots them and kills them. There are some people who they can't even finish drawing the gun fast enough before they get shot. So drawing the gun and chambering around, and that there's also the possibility that you might, in the heat of the moment, not fully realize that you need to chamber around. You pull the gun out, you start pulling the trigger, nothing happens because there's nothing in the chamber. It's a really bad time to have a little oopsie like that. So don't do that. And if you insist on it, you might as well not carry, quite frankly. So really the main takeaway with all of this is that you have a lot to consider and educate yourself on before you start to carry a concealed weapon. And again, I'm not the type to say that it should be legally restricted in any ways that it isn't already, but that you have a responsibility to take the time to learn these things, to practice these things, and to get your mindset straight so that you don't present a danger to society and to yourself, in more ways than just actual physical danger, but also the possibility of legal consequences. So, you need to know the law behind it. You need to know the moral implications behind it. You need to understand some of the somewhat more basic concepts, maybe getting into intermediate concepts about the way that your gun works. If you don't even know what double action, for example, means, something like that, or a decocker, uh, what are you doing? Like, you really need to know at least some really fundamental stuff like that. You need to be competent. If you can't draw within, God, at least like 3 seconds, preferably faster. If you can't keep your shots within, I'd say maybe about a 6 inch group at 10 yards or so, at least with your handgun. Um, Stuff like that. If you can't change magazines very fast, anything like that, um, you have more work to do before you get started. Um, and especially if you're a hothead and kind of generally a violent person, you like to engage in conflict, or maybe you don't necessarily believe that you like to, but people tell you that you have a bad habit of that. That's something you really need to take note of and deal with fully before you go any further, because otherwise that is going to get you in a lot of trouble. It might get you killed, it might get somebody else killed. Even if nobody dies, you might spend the rest of your life in prison. So that's definitely something that's maybe the worst issue of them all, in my opinion. Because if you do something like, the Israeli carry thing, like I mentioned, you might get yourself killed, or you might not. It might just cost you some time that you may be lucky enough that you could, in that one circumstance, happen to get away with it. Um, but those are like the only two options there. If you're, like I said, just a shitty fucking awful person that fights people all the time, you could kill somebody else, maybe also get yourself killed in the process, and even if not, then you go on to spend the rest of your life in prison or get executed. In which case, two people have died, and the legal system has run up a bunch of money and time and resources on your ass. It's no good. So if you're that guy, don't carry. If you're any of these people, um, not yet, at least. Like I said, there's hope. You can educate yourself. You can deal with these things. You can get, first of all, get psychological help for your anger issues if you have them. Um, you can educate yourself on basic firearm concepts. Start with the rules of safety first, and then work your way up from there. You can take time to practice things. Just do more research, do more work. There's a lot that goes into it, but that's just the way it is. This is not something that you can take lightly because this is literally a life and death decision. Um, so I hope I've fucking rammed that point home enough that it's not a game, it's not a movie or video game. Um, this is some real shit, and you know, one tiny mistake can end your life or ruin it. So um, I hope this has helped at least somebody. If not, I hope it's at least been entertaining, anyways. But I think that about wraps up all I wanted to say. So I'll see you next time.